Who had better box art, Japan or the United States? That's what we're about to find out in this episode of Defunct Games Decides, the show that's all about coming to a conclusive conclusion. I'll be joined today by my buddy and the host of the Halcyon Show, Lorne Riseley. Together, we're going to look through 7 classic games released on the Genesis and Mega Drive in the 1980s and 90s. I'm talking about games like Phantasy Star, Strider, Contra Hard Corps, Columns, Castlevania Bloodlines, and Golden Axe. All of these games had radically different box art depending on where you lived, and we're about to decide which country comes out on top. Join us for this debut episode of Defunct Games Decides. Well, Lorne, let me ask you. Did you grow up playing the Genesis, or I guess in your neck of the woods, it was the Mega Drive? Do you have much experience with the Mega Drive?
Yes, but I don't remember.
Yes, but you don't remember. Like, I know in past episodes you've talked a little about you played some Sonic.
Correct, Amundo.
Did you play any other big games like Streets of Rage or Strider or Ghouls and Ghosts or Columns or any of those? Did you try any of those the collections, the Sega Genesis collections that have come out, for example?
Unfortunately not, but I do plan to pick up the Sega miniature version that a lot of the game companies are producing these days, just because I think it would be another one of those great little experiences to get a taste of everything that console had to offer.
Yeah, and there's some great games on that, some real big surprises, and also Tetris, weirdly enough. Anyway, today I want to do something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, which is an episode of Defunct Games Decides. Because what we're going to do is we're going to decide, this is going to be a big battle between East versus West, because I'm sure you've seen this before, but there are oftentimes what happens is in the West, we'll get one type of cover art, and in the East, it's something completely different. It's something, completely different. And I want to explore those with the Genesis because this year, this August, just a couple of months from now, marks the 30th anniversary of the Sega Genesis. Woo. And now, of course, came out in 1990 over in the UK and Europe. And technically, it came out in 1988 in Japan. So, but for me, 1989 was the year, and that's the one I plan on celebrating. 100%. So today, I've chosen a wide selection of just completely random, big and small Genesis games and Mega Drive games that had completely different covers and sometimes titles, completely different covers in Japan and the US. And what we're going to do today, you and we're going to decide which game has the best cover. And if we can't agree, if we can't come to a consensus, then what we're going to do is we're going to throw it to the audience, and they're going to tell us, they're going to decide which game has the best cover. Think we can do that?
Oh, the pressure is killing me, but I think we can do it.
All right, game number 1. We're going to start with the game that is the reason I bought a Genesis back in the very early 90s, and that's Strider. This is an arcade port. This, as you can see from the American cover on the right, this was the first Mega memory game. That is for those that don't have a calculator, that's exactly 1 megabyte of memory this game was packed into. It's not a ton, but that was a big deal. At the time, this was the first one that was a full megabyte on the Genesis. They didn't think it could be done. And then, of course, like a year later, it was 16 megabyte, and then 24 and 32, and expensive cartridges. And then, of course, over on the left, we have the Japanese cover, which is completely different. It is, and that's the thing we're going to find with all of these, is the Japanese one is often a little bit more manga or comic booky, a little more artistic, whereas the American one, especially with this one, is trying to go a little bit more realistic. So I'm dying to know what you think of these two covers. Which of these do you think is best, Lorne?
Best? there's no doubt in my mind that the Japanese cover is the superior of these two covers.
Yeah.
I think you'll agree with that.
Yeah, for sure. Do you like the American cover?
Well,
like if you saw that, would you have bought it?
I have a question for you about the American cover.
Yeah, go for it.
Is there any particular reason why they've gone for William Shatner as Strider?
Yeah. It's a young William Shatner too.
He's been lifting, you can tell.
Yeah.
But I have so many questions about that American cover. Oh, the purple suit as well. He's he's escaping from some kind of alien prison. You can tell it's in the background.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
It's a bit Russian.
The other question I have about that cover is the title. It has a sword stuck in it.
Yeah.
Not cutting through it, stuck in it.
Just kind of stuck. Well, or mid-swing.
Well, I suppose, but it's just one of those things that I kind of look at and I go, there's no motion to that sword at all.
No, you're right. Actually,
I like the design
of the
things.
Sword, I actually like the cover, or I like the logo, and how the boot is a little above the logo. I like actually everything below the artwork is great.
I think just on balance, the Japanese version. Number one, it looks more like. I know that he had a cartoon counterpart, which he more closely resembles. I think the balance of the color, the contrast between the red and the blue works really, really well.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And
that villain in the background is way more menacing in this one.
What is that castle in the back? Is that inspired by something in the game, or is that just something?
Yeah, it's set in the future and it's sort of vaguely, Russian or like USSR. And so yeah, I mean all that makes sense in the game except for the sword. I don't understand the sword in the American one. Because
Indeed.
I like that it actually is showing some motion there.
But they have a really sweet design of a sword. In the logo design, the sword design in the logo looks really cool. Like the little nubs on the outside of the handle. It's cool.
The logo sword's a lot more like the Japanese one, which was an energy thing. But all right, so and what I really like though is I think it must be the Japanese or Sega's icon for action. Over the bottom left-hand corner next to the one player, whereas the guy just kind of, like getting blown away from an explosion or something. That's great.
You can tell he's in the middle of a Wilhelm scream as that logo's been taken. That's great.
Yeah, the Japanese one all the way.
100%.
I think we can all agree with that. All right, up next, we have Castlevania Bloodlines versus Vampire Killer. Of course, the same game, different name depending on the region. But well, first off, when it comes to the different names, let's first talk a little bit about the names. Which of those names do you like better, Castlevania Bloodlines or Vampire Killer?
Well, you may or may not agree with this. Vampire Killer sounds perfectly cool, but it sounds a bit generic.
Okay.
Whereas Castlevania Bloodlines, it sounds like it's got more of a it's a nicer ring to it as well. I would proffer.
Sure.
What do you think?
Sure. I like the name Vampire Killer better, I think.
Really?
Yeah. I just think there have been too many things with the name Bloodlines.
Okay.
All right, but that's neither here nor there. So let's talk a little bit about these covers.
Okie dokie.
These are very busy covers. At least the American one is a very busy cover.
Oh, I think you're right. They're both pretty busy though.
Yeah. I like the Japanese one better on this one. Because I think that it does a better job of highlighting the characters. Like we get all three of sort of the main big cast of characters. We get the John Morris, Elizabeth Bartley, and I think that's Eric Lacard, if I remember correctly. And we don't really get much of that. I mean, we get an action shot of Elizabeth in the American one, and then there's a very weird version of Dracula off in the distance.
That's Dracula? It looks like Beast from the X-Men.
It does look like Beast, and not the one played by Frasier. Yeah. Like, they really spend a lot of time... they spend a lot of time on just the bad guys, which I think that was the big selling point, but also the Seinfeld, like the furry, not furry, the poofy white shirt.
Oh, that's good observation. I didn't notice that until just the moment that you highlighted it.
They spend a lot, some artist loving detail on all of those, but I think I like the Japanese one better here. This is a close one for me, though.
Well, I don't disagree with anything you said about the Japanese cover. It's starker, it's brighter, the characters are more well developed. I have to say though, even with the American cover's preposterously large hands and crumpled shirt,
yes,
probably
those hands.
They're bigger than his head. But I probably prefer that just because it conveys more of a sense of these are his adversaries and they outweigh him. It kind of visually demonstrates the mountain of the task in front of him, whereas the Vampire Killer poster, it looks a little bit unbalanced, and it looks just, again, it maybe doesn't convey the nature of the game as clearly as the Bloodlines cover does.
Okay. Well, which of these two do you think John Morris looks more badass in? Do you think it's the American one or the Japanese one?
It depends. The American one's hands could beat the Japanese guys so badly, but yeah, I do see what you're saying.
He also has a bigger whip, or like a cooler whip.
A cooler, but in terms of girth, not so much. Those hands don't lie, my friend. But I do see what you're saying. His character looks a little bit less well designed, and it doesn't look as appealing. But I like the overall aesthetic of that cover versus the Japanese cover.
Yeah, I get that. I'm with you. I could probably be swayed.
Likewise,
I'm real
actually.
close
Likewise.
though on the This is a close call for me.
Sure.
And I think the thing that kind of pushed me over the edge when it came to the Japanese one was just seeing Eric Lecard with his hair, and yeah, and then I also like what Elizabeth looks like in the Japanese one better. But
Sure.
all right, well, this is a split decision, so I guess we'll just have to see what the audience says.
Make the right decision, everybody.
Oh boy, I can't wait to see what you think of Golden Axe, because I have real strong opinions about this one. But I'm gonna let you go first on this one.
Well, my biggest thing with both of these covers is I don't understand why the old guy in the Japanese version is so ripped. He is ridiculously ripped.
The dwarf, you mean?
Well, he could be a...
He is just kind of kneeling, so it's hard to tell. And
look at his
everybody's
arms.
Ripped in that.
He's
this is a bodybuilder poster.
Well, that's
the
the thing.
Japanese one.
Even compared to the guy in front, who they've literally sculpted, his biceps are just preposterous. Look at those things. His bicep has another bicep. But I just couldn't get over the dwarf in the background there, who's just absolutely Red City. But I mean, what do you make of the overall aesthetics compared to each other then?
I think everybody looks weird in the Japanese version.
Even the girl on the right?
Yeah, it's a weird pose. It's just such a weird bodybuilder pose.
Her foot. Look at the way her foot's positioned. She's not posing. She's mid-accident.
Yeah, and yeah, it just everybody looks so weird here, and including the dragon. I don't understand this cover at all. I'm not saying the American cover was much better. They don't look weird in the American cover, and I like that you know, we actually show some mounting of an animal, because that's big in the game. But I mean, the American one just looks like they're posing like, you know, like it's a poster from Conan the Barbarian or something, which is
I agree.
what they're trying to do.
Clearly.
The other one, they just obviously just copied pictures from bodybuilders.
Yeah. It's a bit too realistic for you to think that they made that up on their own. I will give you that.
Yeah. This is dumb, but the American cover, the dude's hair is so much better. It's almost a mullet on the Japanese cover. It's not good.
But the hair on the lady on the American cover is worse than the Japanese cover. You have to admit that.
It's just because she's in motion.
It's going both ways.
Yes.
Which motion?
No, I think all around, and you know, everybody looks younger.
Sure.
No, the American one by a landslide.
I mean, I agree, by the way, but it's one of those weird, just the aesthetics tie in together much better on the right, even though everything is super realistic and polished to perfection on the left-hand side. It just really doesn't work as a presentation because it raises too many questions.
Yeah, I agree. Though I do like the way they incorporated the dragon and then the fire in the background in the American one. That is cool. That looks nice. Okay, so we both agree the American one is best.
We do indeed, yes.
All right, let's move on.
Cool.
All right. Up next, we have Shinobi 3 Return of the Ninja Master on the right, or the Super Shinobi 2, the Japanese game, with that fun action little icon in the bottom left, on the left. Which of these do you like better? First off, which of these names is better? Do you like Return of the Ninja Master or the Super Shinobi 2?
Just on name alone, I kind of like the ring of Return of the Ninja Master because it's so quintessentially 80s/90s, and I love that.
For sure. That whole cover is very, very late 80s, early 90s.
100%. I mean, but there's something weirdly likable about it. Yeah, well, I think the Super Shinobi 2, I think it's got to be the Shinobi 3 Return of the Ninja Master just on title alone, but what do you think?
Sure. No, I'm with you. Shinobi 3 Return of the Ninja Master is a better name.
But
what? Yeah. Now, does that carry over to which of these covers is better, though? That's the question.
Well, it depends. Look, I prefer more definition and put it this way. I don't like the airbrush graphics that they seem to be really hot on the American covers so far.
Yeah.
So that automatically puts it at a disadvantage. I like the fact that the enemies are all there and there's a bit of depth to it. But come on, that Japanese version's just got so much to like about it.
Yeah, I don't like this American cover all that much. Is there
anything specific that really jumps out at you?
I mean, there's the depth, but you're right. It's the sort of the airbrush look that, especially when it's side by side here with the Japanese cover. And I mean, that Japanese cover, it looks like a movie poster. Like you could take off Sega and the One Player and the Mega Drive cartridge and all that stuff, and you could put this as just any random 80s action film. It doesn't even have to have a ninja in it. Like Troll 2 didn't have a troll in it. You know, just toss that on any box, and I immediately want to watch that movie. Especially because apparently he's in space.
You're right.
How'd that happen?
Well, I'll tell you what the other problem with the American cover is. It doesn't look finished. It looks like there's a giant space in the background that they could have put something, whereas the Japanese cover, they went, I don't know, let's put the moon.
Right.
Which is
it's just,
you know.
Plus, it's like, all this stuff, it looks like a lot of cardboard cutouts on the American cover.
Yes, you're right, yeah. Plus, just little details like the subtle differences in just the eyes of the main character. The eyes on the right look just a little bit bland and unemotional, whereas even though the character on the left has just got a slight, it's really he's shrouded in darkness, really, but there's just an ever so slight tinge of emotion there. It just gives it that little bit of extra added depth.
Yeah. I mean, the Shinobi 3 cover just looks like something I would see at a carnival and shoot at.
Yep, that's a good shout.
So,
his torso is also massive compared to his legs, if you look.
You're right, yes. I think we can. I think we both agree that the Japanese one here is superior.
Yeah, I don't think there's much debate about that one.
No. All right, so up next we have Contra Hard Corps, which I didn't even plan this. Just a couple of hours ago, they announced a sequel, another Contra game coming, I don't know, later this year, maybe next year, who knows. But they just announced it at E3, so I'm all excited about that. So let's talk a little bit about Contra Hard Corps, which may or may not be called that. I don't read Japanese, so who knows what the other cover says. But again, we're looking at the Japanese one on the left and the American one on the right, and I'm excited to see where you come down on this one, because this is a huge difference between these two. We have very much a very Japanese manga style. I know people are going to complain about that in the comments. But then on the American side, it is very much American action hero. I mean, it could almost be like a movie poster, though. I mean, you wouldn't see that. But I'm real curious to see where you land on this one, because I have strong feelings about this.
Well, then let me allow you the floor by making it very clear from the off that the American version wins, if nothing else, for the size of the gun and the effort that it's taking to hold that thing in place. My God, what a manly cover that is. But
this is definitely a manly cover, for sure. I just, look, I know a lot of people like the manga style and, you know, things, the anime characters and stuff like that, but none of that is working for me in a game that I know by the name Hardcore. There's just, those characters, they're not hardcore enough, especially that little robot guy with the gun. Like, that's not working for me. They're cool designs. They would fit perfectly in another game that I would probably like the cover, but they're all kind of mashed together. Like, we got the Wolfman guy in the top there, and he's just kind of pushed in with the other people. It's a very jumbled cover. The American cover, it is a lot simpler. It's just the manliest dude in the world shooting a giant robot, and I mean, for a game called Hardcore, that's kind of what I want. So yeah, I think the American cover is not just a little better, but a lot better.
You're right. The Japanese cover, they're all squished in together, which doesn't make any sense because there's a lot of empty space that they could have used to fill, to widen them out, to give each character a bit of space to kind of set themselves apart. Mm-hmm. But more to the point, it's difficult to understand why they're all simultaneously jumping off a building.
Yes.
So
there's also a guy in the middle of them where that space is, which is weird.
Oh, is there?
Or there's like a little face thing there, isn't there?
Oh, okay. No, you're right. It's just one of those things where I go,
like an alien face. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's one of those, because the wolf guy, for instance, has got, like, he's shooting, so that looks like just a completely separate cropped picture that they've just thrown in there because, oh, wait, he's in the game. We need to make sure he's on the cover art. Whereas the American version, they've just like, what's the coolest scene that we can use to promote this game? I know a giant robot using giant claw hands to kill, our hero who's barely able to contain the size of the gun that he's firing. It just works.
And I mean, the Japanese cover reminds me of like when movie posters will have like a bunch of actors in front of a green screen, and those pictures were definitely not taken on the same day or anywhere near similar poses, but they still have to kind of mash them into the same poster.
Indeed.
So it just looks weird. And that's like none of the disparate parts of the Japanese cover, none of those parts feel like they go together. And like, I mean, some of the characters are regular size, and there's suddenly this one guy has a big head, and then the robot, it's
trying way too hard.
It just does not work for me.
It's trying way too hard to be cool. Way too hard. Yeah, I think we can agree on that.
Speaking of cool, let's talk about Columns. Oof. Do you remember Columns? Have you ever played Columns?
I don't think I have, I'm afraid to say.
Columns was sort of Sega's response to the Tetris craze.
Ah, right, okay.
This was sort of born out of everybody like having like the bug for puzzle games. Like suddenly everybody needed to have a game where, you know, they were dropping icons or dropping pieces or something like that, and you had to match a couple of them. And anyway, it's not a game I think that holds up particularly well, but I'm curious to see what your thoughts are about these two covers, because these are very different. One's very matter of fact. The American one on the right, very matter of fact about what it is. It just like shows you the type of game it is. You match these three, you're done. Also, it has a little movement showing you that they're coming from the top. You look at this cover, you know exactly what you're getting.
Well, so this is tricky because in pure aesthetics, I kind of get what they're going for on the Japanese version.
Yeah.
But I like the way the American version looks better.
Do you?
There's something about just the fact that it's got more definition, which is rare for an American cover, it seems. It seems to convey the point of the game a little bit more clearly. But
it definitely does that.
But again, similar to some of the previous entries, I could be convinced that the Japanese version is superior just because it's got a lot more going on. But I don't know. What do you make of them?
I think I like the Japanese one more, but only slightly. Like, in fact, even as I just described the American one, I found myself wavering a little bit because I'm like, yeah, I mean, it does show you exactly what it is, and the movement from the, like, I mean, but I kind of like the world building as limited as it is. Over on the Japanese cover, it's sort of like Egyptian, like there's all this, you could create a story by looking at this cover, whereas you can't really do that in the American cover or the American game, or any of the games for that matter. Also, and this is not a small thing, we have a new icon at the bottom of the Japanese one, which is apparently their puzzle icon, which is just a big question mark and a Rubik's Cube. Rubik's Cube? Rubik's Cube.
So it's basically a Riddler trap.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. Then I think the Japanese cover has to win on that basis alone.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with the Japanese one on this, but I don't know. This is a tough one.
This is a tight one. This is a tight one, yeah, for definite.
Those gems do look better. Like, if I were to walk down KB Toys or Toys R Us or something like that at the time, and I saw the American cover, I would probably gravitate towards that one as opposed to the Japanese one. But just from a world building and just, like, all the different types of gems and stuff that are falling, I don't know. Just barely, I think I'm going to side with the Japanese one. Barely.
I think that's the pair of us could probably, I think we both agree on that then.
All right. All right. Now it's time for what I think is one of the worst covers of all time. I hate this cover. This is Phantasy Star II. This is, of course, the sequel to Phantasy Star, and this was one of the first really big role-playing games on the Genesis. This is a great game, one of my favorite Genesis role-playing games, but the cover is terrible. Like, it's basically like they cast Gary Busey after a stroke with Deanna Troi from Star Trek, and then put him on this weird like Mass Effect world, and like it does not work for me. And those horns, by the way, look dangerous.
Well, I could go one further. It looks like a couple have come across Anakin Skywalker fresh off of his battle with Obi-Wan Kenobi, and they're asking, do we call someone? No, leave him.
There is a very concerned look.
She's like, no, let's just leave and hope no one saw us here. Wow.
Yeah.
Scathing indictment to kick us off.
It's just a bad cover. One of the worst covers. Now the Japanese cover, just almost by default, is better. I'm not in love with the Japanese cover. It doesn't show off the technology aspect except for the background. I mean, it's sort of like they put like a Final Fantasy character in front of Akira. And then there's like a mech guy in the background. It's a little busy. It's definitely more of the manga style. But it's clearly just miles ahead of the American cover.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do understand what you're saying, and the fact that the character doesn't share the same depth perception as the buildings it kind of throws it off a little bit, because he doesn't look imposing or heroic from that angle with that background. It kind of looks a little bit disjointed, but you can't argue that the difference in just purely from the aesthetic perspective on the Japanese side, it just looks so much cooler than, like you say, Gary Busey wearing what appears to be like a raincoat over an overall with a trumpet. It just doesn't look. It doesn't. Number one, it doesn't look very intriguing. Number two, the lack of detail really doesn't help me make out anything about the cover beyond the two characters.
Yes.
Everything
else
is
just
hard
kind
to
of
make anything from it. Yeah, it's very difficult to make anything out apart from obviously the title, but that's juxtaposed against a black background, so it's super easy to see. So yeah, the Japanese cover really just, when compared to its American counterpart, there's not really any competition on this one.
No, none at all. And I'd be remiss if I did not mention that there is a new icon for us to look at the bottom left, which apparently is their adventure icon, which is a sword through the Foxhound logo.
Sweet. So you like, the Japanese covers have such great warning logos, if you want to call them that, or just advisory logos.
Yes, they do. You're definitely right about that, Lorne. I think that's going to bring us to the end of our very first episode of Defunct Games Decides. But don't feel bad, because we're going to be back next Friday with another new episode where we compare more old school Genesis covers. That's right, we're not done with Sega yet. And next week features legitimate classics like Streets of Rage, Alien Storm, Comic Zone, and more. I want to thank my guest Lorne Riseley. I couldn't have done it without him. And hey, don't forget to subscribe to his channel. You can go ahead and find the link in the details box. From both Lorne and myself, we'll see you next week for more deciding. Hey, thanks for watching us talk about classic Genesis covers. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we'll be back next Friday with round 2 of Defunct Games Decides. Now here's the question I have for you. Japan versus the United States. How would you rank these covers? Do you think we got it right, or were we totally off base? Also, if you want to know more about some of these games, I've covered a bunch of them in our weekly Game Over series. Both the Strider and Golden Axe episodes are well worth checking out. In the meantime, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.